I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon. My name is Nick Romano, President of the Bonita Bay Veterans Council, and we're so glad to have you here. Please listen, and I will give this over to the Bay Singers.
The Bay Singers are going to sing the Star Spangled Banner, but we encourage you to join us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thanks to our Bonita Bay Singers for being with us today. The BBVC has been celebrating Veterans Day for the past 9 years, and the Bay Singers have been with us each step along the way. It wouldn't be the same without them. Thank you. Before we get started, I would like to give a shout out to the United States Marine, celebrating their 248th birthday yesterday. For those of you who served in the Marines, please stand up. Hoorah! Today on Veterans Day, we salute the men and women, excuse me, who have served our country with honor and valor. Be assured that we are continuing our mission of helping veterans and their families in this very critical time of need. It is due to your generous support that we have been able to continue our mission. And also, very important, the support of the Bonita Bay Club and this tremendous staff who has been serving us like this and helping us for 9 years. Since the Bonita Bay Veterans Council inception 9 years ago, we have made over 2,000 direct donations supporting over 9,000 veterans and their families. We have raised over $1.8 million and donated over $1.6 million to those in need. The most important part, however, is that 98.6% of every dollar that we receive goes directly to the veterans. Thanks to Ken Mack. We sponsor 2 mobile food pantries per month at the VA in Cape Coral, where an average of 150 veterans receive up to a 2-week supply of food and necessities. We have created scholarship programs at and an entrepreneurial program at FGCU University, as well as scholarship programs at Bonita Springs and Estero High Schools. In addition, we have formed a partnership with Golden Paws, who provide service dogs to veterans in need. And I don't know if those of you who were here at our gala last year, we got Trooper, who was the dog we sponsored, up on the stage and made him an honorary member of the Bonita Bay Veterans Council. Most recently, we will be providing scholarships to veterans employees of One Bonita Bay. That includes the Bonita Bay Club, the Community Association, and the Marina. Employees who are veterans, who have spouses who are veterans, and so on and so forth. Also, we are working with Lee and Collier counties to provide housing for veterans through Habitat for Humanity, who are here with us today. We have received numerous awards and commendations from many organizations, such as the Veterans Administration, United Way, the City of Bonita Springs, Daughters of the Revolution, Florida Gulf Coast University, and the State of Florida Veteran Service Medal was presented to all BBVC members by Senator Rick Scott in this room. Over the past 6 months, Rich Pilla and Lou Diamichis has spent much time developing 2 programs. One Bonita Bay Scholarships, and in the development of a relationship with Habitat for Humanity of Lee and Collier County. I am proud to introduce Rich, a member of the board, to discuss our programs, One Bonita Bay Scholarships, followed by Lou to discuss our relationship with Habitat for Humanity. Thank you.
Now, I usually like to start off with something to make people laugh. But the last time I did that, a couple of months ago, we were out in Colorado, and we had joined a club, and they wanted all new members to get up and speak. So I got up and I started off saying, I hope you all can understand my Alabama accent. So most people laugh like you did. And in case, I just want to set the record straight, I am not from Alabama. So anyway, I sat down, and 5 minutes later, this man comes walking over to me with his phone out, and he's got a picture of this girl, his granddaughter, who plays for the Alabama lacrosse team. So he looks at me, he goes, so you're a big Alabama fan, right? I said, I was really only kidding. And he looks at me, he goes, I thought I had a new best friend. I felt so bad, I had to go off and apologize. But I am from New York, in case you didn't guess that, but don't hold that against me. Anyway, this happy Veterans Day to all my fellow veterans. It's great to be here. I'm going to discuss briefly the scholarship program we have. It was begun 7 years ago under the leadership of my good friend Jim Papandrea, who was a board member, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. He had kind of a lame excuse. His granddaughter was getting married. I mean, he couldn't come up with something better than that. Anyway, so he started over at Florida Gulf Coast University, and most of the scholarships that we've given to FGCU are for veterans. The way the program worked as we progressed to first Estero High School, then Bonita Springs High School, is if someone was a immediate family member, meaning a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, a spouse, a child or a grandchild. And over the course of, since we started the program 7 years ago, we've given out approximately 40 scholarships, totaling almost $100,000. And one of the highlights of my year is always to go to the presentations at the schools, and I feel like a rock star Paul McCartney's here. Oh, okay. Because they're all so happy to see me. This year, we came up, the board, with, why don't we expand it to include One Bonita Bay? And also, instead of just college or university level, why don't we include trade school? So going forward, and just for all the veterans who might be members here, if you want to go to golf school, that doesn't qualify. Unless you're going on the pro tour. So Laura, who works at the marina, and Al at the community association have been helping me. Unfortunately, Laura had the misfortune of, when I first met her, when I get somebody locked in a room, then I just keep rolling with my jokes, but I can't do it here today. But I'm looking forward to working with them and hopefully, giving out. The way it works is the students who might want to be considered for a scholarship have to write an essay as to why they believe they should be entitled to one. And then we let the area vet it, and then we look at it as the board and see which makes sense. But I'm looking forward to that working well, and thank you all for listening to me and laughing at my jokes, the most important thing. All right, Lou.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you for not telling that Chicken Romano joke again this year. Right? Well, thank you, Bonita Bay, and due to your generous contributions, in addition to the scholarships for the greater Bonita Bay community, we're able to expand our veterans partnerships to include Habitat for Humanity in both Lee and Collier County. Currently, there are 70,000 veterans in this country who are homeless. 10,000 alone in Florida. The veteran homeless rate is double the national rate of the general population. In reviewing our local support, we noticed a significant increase in our support for rent payments for local veterans. We wanted to do more in support of affordable housing, permanent affordable housing for veterans. In January, fellow board member Joe Castro Giovanni and I started working with Collier County Habitat. In January, we met with Lisa Lefkow, the CEO of Habitat for Humanity in Collier County. We met with Bonita Bay resident Kathleen Flynn Fox, who lives in Trevera, who is the board chair of Collier County Habitat. And we met with Carl Keener, who is here today, another board member and retired Army veteran. Our mission was to find veteran families who needed supporting funds to finish their financial qualifications for a Habitat home. Collier County has 20 applicants for every home that they have available, and they have made it a priority to support veterans in this housing effort. Our partnership was successful, and in July we provided funding in the form of a down payment that allowed a Vietnam-era vet to move into his home in July. Collier County has a second veteran scheduled for a January closing. His house is currently under construction. David is a 6-year Navy corpsman working in Collier County permitting, and his wife is a middle school teacher. And we plan to provide the funding for a down payment for David to move into his house in January. We started working with Lee County Habitat and with Becky Lucas, and today we have Alicia Baird, VP of Strategic Partnerships, and Rachel West, who you might know is the Bonita Bay Campaign Manager and Partnership Manager for Habitat in Lee County. Lee County has started a Veterans Bill program and has their first veteran since 2020, a combat medic by the name of Greg with 6 children. Greg is currently completing 300 sweat equity hours and 20 hours of home ownership and financial literacy classes. His home is currently under construction in the Prospect area neighborhood of Fort Myers. Our support to Greg was in the form of funding construction materials for his home. Now I'll let Greg tell you what this means to him in this short video from Habitat, Lee County.
Here to celebrate our inaugural Veterans Bill Bill. He's here raising the walls on the Army Veterans Hall, and he's trained as a combat medic. And we have several veterans who are volunteering alongside him.
I've been in the work field since I left the military, but it's still difficult having to go to school and raising 6 kids at the same time and work full time. So you lose that dream.
Fred came in and sought help after trying to go through the process with his VA, realizing his income just didn't really meet that point where he could afford a traditional mortgage and purchase the home through a traditional mortgage. And so he came to Habitat with the need, and we're just really happy that he did.
With Habitat, it helps you with different programs and the finances. It was much easier to go through the process of paying off.
There are so many people who talk about affordable housing, and you talk and you talk and you talk, but Habitat's actually out there doing it. They're making affordable housing happen.
They're helping me build a home, and I'm paying it for myself, and I'm not paying for someone else's mortgage. I'm paying for my future and my grandkids' future.
We really help veterans by giving a hand up and out. Our families go through program requirements, they partner with us.
Everybody deserves a place to stay.
So now we have a permanent relationship with Habitat for Humanity in both Lee and Collier County. So we plan to continue this relationship, and it's all due to your generous support of the Bonita Bay Veterans Council that we're able to do this. So now I'd like to introduce Steve Aronson, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Steve.
Thanks, Lou. I always have the delight to be able to present people that we think you're going to enjoy hearing from, and this time is no exception. I'm going to be introducing our keynote speaker, Bill Drum. Bill and Nancy came to Bonita Bay in 2003. They both play tennis. He's not as good as Nancy. Bill rides motorcycles. I don't think Nancy does. After he left the service, Bill went to Southern Illinois University to get a Bachelor in Science degree and then his MBA. Then he did something that most of us couldn't do anymore. He went to work at Ralston Purina and had a short 32-year career at that location. That's amazing. Most of us couldn't keep a job. So that's great news. When he left, when Ralston Purina merged with Nestle, Bill was the vice president of global risk management and was responsible for global risk insurance and safety. And he also became the president of Checkerboard Insurance Company. Not one that I've heard of before, but the logo you will recognize from Ralston Purina. After he left that short career, he spent 11 years as a consultant providing global risk exposure information to Fortune 500 companies. A couple that I found out about you might have heard of. One was Lubrizol, a manufacturer of lubricants and chemicals. And another one, to just tell about how fast he runs, was Energizer Holding Company, the battery manufacturer. That's all interesting, but that's not why we're here today. Bill has an extraordinary story to tell you. He was in Vietnam in 66, 67. Those of us who were in combat understand that working for Company A, 1st Brigade, 8th Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division, know that that's an organization that was under fire most of the time. Bill did something when we asked him if he would like to speak. He did something that most of us probably didn't think of. He was smart enough at the time to send a lot of letters home to Nancy. And much to, I think, his surprise and Nancy's pleasure, he found a box that had over 160 letters and some slides and some tapes. And over the last couple of months, as Bill and I were talking about what he was going to do, he discovered some amazing information that he had forgotten. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing from him. As a combat infantry sergeant earning a Bronze Star, I'd like you to meet Bill Drum.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my military career as such. Actually, my time with the military started back in 1965 in December. I was 19 years old. I was dating a very attractive young 17-year-old girl. I was working full-time in a grocery store, had money, driving a 57 Chevy. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. How's that? Oh, sorry. So, and off and on, I was showing up at a local college. I should have been showing up a lot more. Life was really good for me, though. At least it was until I received a draft notice from Uncle Sam. I was drafted March 31st, 1966, and arrived for basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. On April 1st is when I actually arrived at the base, and it was not an April Fool's joke, unfortunately. Basic training for us back then was about 2 months. That went pretty well, except for a case of pneumonia I had, and my biggest concern then was they were going to restart my basic training over, but I was able to talk the doctor into releasing me. At the end of basic training, I was advised that my MOS was 11B, and for those of you who don't know this, 11B is light weapons infantry. That didn't excite me too much. But then I was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana for infantry training. And in Fort Polk, I was there from June 15th to September 4th. Yes, it was extremely hot, it was extremely humid, but it was certainly preparing me for where I was going. This was an extensive training program, I will tell you. It proved to be a critical advantage to me when I got my assignment. At the end of infantry training, we were advised that we would be joining the 1st Cavalry Division. Was actually familiar with it, but only by name. After a 30-day leave, I arrived in Vietnam on October 10th, 1966, and was transferred to the 1st Cavalry Division base camp in An Khê on October 16th. 1st Cavalry Air Mobile was the first full Army division deployed to Vietnam in 1965, and it consisted of 9 battalions of air mobile infantrymen and 434 helicopters. The area of operation was the 2 Corps that we referred to, and it included the Central Highlands of Vietnam. The Central Highlands, if you're not familiar with it, is an extremely large mountainous jungle area that was predominantly occupied and controlled by the North Vietnamese Army until the 1st Cavalry Air Mobile Division arrived with their assault helicopters. In addition to the huge division base camp, centrally located in An Khê, we had several landing zones. Some of these were considerably large, almost the size of a base, but most of them were primarily smaller or field artillery placements. The air mobile concept allowed the infantry soldiers to engage the enemy rapidly and frequently and bring in vital support quickly. It was a phenomenal change. I was sent to the field to Company A, 1st Battalion, 8th Regiment on October 20th, 1966. Now, my first introduction there was meeting the first sergeant who greeted me in the field, not very politely. And it turns out that the 1st Battalion was all airborne. Well, I was not airborne. He reminded me that in very serious words. He also asked me, are you a U.S. or an R.A.? U.S. meaning you were probably drafted or were drafted. R.A. meaning you were an enlisted regular Army. I told him, of course, that I was U.S. He then described me in ways that I hadn't really heard before. And in any event, I will tell you that Sergeant Hansen, which is his name, I will tell you sometimes later, and it's probably within a month or two, we became very good friends. He was a fabulous man. I was also greeted by my squad and fire team leader. Those guys were very cordial and were really helpful. And in fact, they helped me the rest of my, several days within Vietnam. First conflict for me, 6 days after I was sent to the field, I was involved in my first conflict. The company air assaulted into a known Viet Cong village and immediately received small arms fire. We quickly seized the village, with none of our men being injured. There was a small river beside the village, and our platoon was ordered to check out what appeared to be large holes, possibly tunnels. My squad was in front, wading into the river, when we received fire from a large hole, killing our squad leader, Sergeant Gleason, and PFC Collier, who was right near him, immediately jumped into the water to pull him away. He was also unfortunately killed. 2 of us were about 12 feet from the hole, and as soon as that occurred, we started firing the hole up, and then we tossed a couple of grenades at it. Later, we pulled out 3 Viet Cong bodies, and it was a frightening first experience for a young guy. With 3 VC killed, and more importantly, 2 of our men deceased. I'm sure it might sound strange that after 56 years that I can describe this incident in detail, and one might question why. And I think Steve has already introduced you to that. Yes, my girlfriend then, who's now my wife, had saved all of these letters that I had written. She, by the way, had written me several letters every week for the entire time I was in the service. And I will tell you, she also, of course, wrote me while I was in combat. And I would even plead for a letter now and then because it was that important. I couldn't keep the letters she sent me, but she did. She did keep the ones I had sent to her. And as Steve said, there was over 160 of those letters, and much of it was describing what was going on. I would send some letters to my mother, but I would never describe much about what was going on in those letters. For some reason, I felt that a 17-year-old could handle that a lot better. I have no idea. I blame it on my age at the time. But I had become aware of those letters, and they became very important to me. Those letters from her really were extremely important, and I owe her an extreme amount of gratitude, because those were letters that kept me going, they kept my morale up, and they kept my mental status in check. So, it's been a very long and emotional trip down memory lane reading these letters, because I had never read them, I never wanted to read them. And when I was given this assignment to do a speech, I thought, my gosh, I have to read those letters. So I took them out and I read them. It took me a long time to read them. It was, as I said, an emotional issue. Several parts of those letters are just too difficult for me to share, and I'm not going to, especially concerning very close comrades. So let me talk a little bit about what we were doing. Our company A, was in the field approximately 300 days. And that's a long time to be in the field, during my time in Vietnam. Our only downtime was periodically, every month, 2, or depending on what kind of engagement we were in, we were allowed to go back to base camp, or to one of the very large LZs for rest. But usually that also included doing perimeter guard and sometimes running patrols outside the perimeter, which weren't too bad. We did well over 100 helicopter air assaults and extractions throughout the Central Highlands, sometimes under fire, of course. And those were extremely interesting. For example, 2 of our platoons were on patrol searching for enemy in a low mountain area, and I'm doing this almost verbatim from something I had sent. And not having any contact, we were being extracted from a relatively clear area by 2 Chinook helicopters, which hold about 30 to 40 men, and 2 Hueys, Huey helicopters being smaller, holding maybe 5 to 6 or 7 men. The Hueys would be extracting my squad as we were providing a defense for the 2 Chinook helicopters before they took off. The first Chinook helicopter took off okay, but the second was shot up really bad, and the pilot was barely able to get it under control and get it out of the way. My squad continued to return fire as the Hueys were coming in to extract us. But suddenly they banked away and started leaving, and leaving us in a very serious situation. It gave me great concern. Fortunately, the pilots had only made this large circle away from us to avoid the fire and allowing a heavily armed escort gunship to come in, which we got very excited about. It literally blasted that entire area with rockets, machine gun fire, etc., and we were able to actually walk to our Hueys and be escorted out. One of my points to this story is, you would not believe how great these helicopter teams were. Phenomenal people. They would come in under fire, they would pull you out, they would come in, bring you in fire, make sure you were taken care of. They'd bring supplies. They'd even bring supplies when we were out in the boonies, not reachable. If they had to, they'd hover, drop them down. I mean, these guys were unbelievable. Another subject I'll mention is night ambushes. Not my favorite topic. Sometimes, with a single platoon or occasionally the full company, we would set up ambushes, mostly in the mountainous jungle area, along paths we knew or suspected were being used by the enemy, who almost always traveled at night. We would scout out a good place during the day, deciding exactly where we would best be positioned and where we could fall back to, if necessary. Then we would depart the area and quietly return just after dark to set up the ambush. We were usually on line just off the trails with positions protecting our rear and our flanks and early warning positions in short distance at either end of the actual ambush. We would have claymore mines, machine guns, which were strategically located. Then we would set up and wait. Frequently, we waited all night, no result and no sleep. But when it did work, and it did work a few times, it was an unbelievable event. Loud, destructive. The enemy had no chance whatsoever. And the good news is, I do not recall, and none of my letters recall, any incident where on a night ambush we lost men. At one point, we were actually doing platoon night ambushes every other night for about 2 weeks. But unfortunately, we only had about a couple of successful events for that. But they were a little hairier and scarier because of the few number of men we had at that. So what else did we do with our free time? And we had no free time. Guarding landing zones and running patrols out from all of the landing zones, mostly the field battery operations. Guarding key supplies and bridges, mainly on Highway 19 between the 2 major base camps of Pleiku and Anke. Reinforcing other units when they were under attack or outnumbered, and again, we could fly in immediately. We were a lot of times on standby for it, and while we were in the field, helicopters were close by. Also, humping in the mountains of the Central Highlands for days and days on end, frequently encountering the enemy. Another topic that, in my opinion, was difficult for people or for guys out in the field was what I call attrition. And in my opinion, attrition was the major issue for people in Vietnam. Men were frequently coming and going from the field and making it difficult to actually have a cohesive fighting force. The main causes of these attritions were as follows. First of all, rotation. Some of you realize that when we went to Vietnam, it was a different war, to be quite honest. And one of the things that was really different was you only served in country 12 months. The only people that served beyond 12 months volunteered to stay there. So what was happening? This meant you were constantly losing your best trained men with experience, and were usually being replaced with less experienced men. Illnesses were a factor. Although we had great field medics, men would incur injuries, infections, sickness that required them to go to the field hospitals. Fortunately, most of them returned pretty quickly. The other serious issue regarding attrition was casualties. And I'm not going to talk in too much detail about what happened to these people, but I will tell you this. There were some events that are just difficult for me to talk about. So I'm not talking about specific events. The KIAs that we had were 41 during the 12 months I was there in our platoon. We also had a lot more numerous wounded people. The KIAs occurred in 19 different conflicts, and I can actually attest to this off of the information from the War Memorial data. Our company commander was one of those that was KIA. He was an outstanding officer, Captain Titus. He was a West Point graduate who was serving his second term of duty in Vietnam and was amazing. Also, we lost our executive officer, First Lieutenant Aschenbrenner. He was serving as temporary company commander in the field, rose up to help somebody else, and was shot. 3 other lieutenants who were platoon leaders were lost, 4 platoon sergeants were lost, and 29 enlisted men. And as I said, numerous wounded men. And this is in a single company. At times we were as low as 120 men in the field and usually close to 160 to 170. So it was a major loss at the time. And this is not an exception. A lot of people know that there was a lot more action going on in some of the other areas. I had my own attrition story, or I have my own attrition story. For the first 4 months that I was in the field, I was a PFC grunt, appropriately, doing what I was told, sticking close to my fire team leader and my squad leader. And thank God they were there, and thank God they were experienced. And after 4 months or so, I was getting the hang of it pretty well with that kind of leadership. So on March 1st, or in March, I was promoted to Specialist 4th Class and was made a fire team leader with 4 men under me. On June 28th, I was promoted to Sergeant E5 and then became a squad leader with 10 men. Believe it or not, on August 5th, I was named platoon sergeant when my platoon sergeant left to go into a long-range reconnaissance patrol unit. Then on August 27th, not even a month later, we got a new Sergeant First Class, which I was very thankful for. This was a man who'd been in service quite a bit. And he became our platoon sergeant, and I was back, thankfully, to the squad leader. Then 5 days later, on September 1st, our platoon leader, Lieutenant Sullivan, who was a fast friend of mine, was told to leave the field. He was derosing. You're going back, I'm sorry. So suddenly our first sergeant, our Sergeant First Class, ended up becoming the platoon leader, and yes, I ended up becoming the platoon sergeant again. Then, within a short time of that, 30 days, I was removed from the field for a rotation home on September 30th, the day before our battalion was being sent north to support a Marine group who was under a major attack by the North Vietnamese Army. I never knew who replaced me, and it bothered me that I had to leave my platoon, as they were undoubtedly going to be in serious combat. But frankly, even if I had had the choice, I could not risk a serious battle that close to going home, and I wouldn't be very productive. As anybody who has been in combat in that scenario knows, the last 2 to 3 weeks, people are in the field. They can be more dangerous than new people because they're very concerned, they're very worried. And I've witnessed a couple of those, and I will not go into that either. I left Vietnam on October 5th and arrived home on October 7th, 1967. That night, I was out with Nancy, my wife, ever at that time my girlfriend, at our favorite drive-in restaurant, having a burger and having a milkshake. It was absolutely a surreal experience because I knew where my company was. I then filed for, after 30-day leave, I was able to get stationed at Fort Leonard Wood again, where my journey began, and I was thankful for that. I then filled out and received an early out to return to college. And on January 2nd, 1968, after approximately 21 months of service, I was back at college, this time more mature and with a burning desire to succeed. And I will tell you though, in retrospect, my military service was one of the best experiences of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Bill has offered to answer any questions if any of you have any. If not, Bill, thanks very much for moving and informative description of what you went through. It's now my privilege to turn the podium back over to our president, Nick Romano.
Every veteran has a story to tell. Some of us just don't want to tell the story. Others keep it inside them so much that it makes their life very difficult. Bill, thank you. That was phenomenal for every step of the way that you took through the service. And you should be very proud. I'm sure you are, and you should be. Thank you. Well, we're finished, but I want to thank everyone for being with us today. And I want to thank everyone for the support that you have given us. It is greatly appreciated. And just, if you have a pencil, our gala is on March 4th, the first Monday in March, and you'll get all the information. So thank you again. Thank you to the Board of Directors. Very much appreciate it. And that's it. Have a great day. Thank you.